Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Red headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal. This is the proxy battle with Disney. Nelson Peltz not victorious. Disney's Bob Iger and the rest of company management has won that proxy vote over Nelson Peltz and Trian Asset Management with the board election. That, of course, is a meeting that began roughly 23 minutes ago. We did know coming into the meeting, Joe, that Disney had secured the backing and Iger and his team had secured the backing of prominent shareholders, the largest shareholders, including Vanguard and BlackRock. So perhaps this vote is not all too surprising, the ultimate outcome, but this is definitely a loss for Nelson Peltz, a win for Iger and his management team.
Yeah, pretty remarkable here. That didn't take long. This meeting's still underway here. The red headline that Kailey just mentioned, we did hear reporting that Bob Iger had the votes, and he had some awfully prominent people behind him, not just some huge institutional investors, but George Lucas himself, who, of course, sold the Star Wars franchise to Bob Iger and helped to make this kind of the media empire that it has become with Marvel and so many other brands that he pulled together. The question, Kailey, as you know all too well, comes down to not just recovering from the pandemic, the theme park business that's been pretty strong, but what to do with streaming and how to make that a profitable enterprise.
Absolutely. And of course, that's one of the concerns that Nelson Peltz has had, why he was trying to get on the board to initiate some of the changes he would like to see, in part relating to that business. I would note that Disney shares are down right now on the day, down by just over 1%. We saw a small leg lower on this news, which again is not all too surprising, Joe, but it does raise questions of, now that this proxy battle may be done and dusted, still the trajectory of the company going forward, considering we're talking about a win for Bob Iger, who has left Disney before and then had to be brought back. And there is still a major question around succession plans and what a post-Iger Disney ultimately is going to look like. I
wonder if we do learn more about that here today, remembering as well, this is a stock that's actually been up significantly over the past couple of months. Left for dead about a year ago. This thing was down in the low to mid 80s at one point, Kailey, and here in the 120s, it's been looking a lot better. And we've seen a lot of the price targets increased with this very moment in mind. And now that this has happened, maybe this is a bit of a sell the news situation.
Yeah, down about 1% again today, but up 35% to your point, Joe, year to date thus far. We want to turn now to Geetha Ranganathan, who covers Disney for us over at Bloomberg Intelligence. Geetha, I know you've probably been paying attention to what actually happened in the meeting, but now we do know the result of the vote. Iger and Disney management victorious. Nelson Peltz dealt a blow here. What happens next now that this is over?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a vote of confidence on Bob Iger. I think it removes like an immediate distraction. I mean, this has been a top agenda item for Bob Iger ever since Nelson Peltz started agitating in October of last year. And he has really devoted a lot of time and a lot of resources, Kailey, to this campaign. I mean, he has taken it personally. They've spent something like upwards of $40 million. It's one of the most expensive proxy battles ever fought. And he's done a lot of things actually to take control of the narrative at Disney. But in terms of any near-term changes, I think it's just going to be business as usual. Obviously, he comes out victorious. I think this is definitely going to supercharge him and his efforts. But there is, going to be continued, watch on kind of how Disney performs. But obviously, for today, I think Bob Iger is definitely very relieved.
When you say, Geetha, how Disney performs, you mean the stock, right? This is only going to last as long as the stock holds up. If we go back down to the 80s again, I suspect we're having another conversation about Bob Iger's future and the direction of the company strategically.
They do have a lot of catalysts in place that should, serve in kind of keeping up that momentum. So, the two of the core areas of their business, and Disney is a huge diversified conglomerate, but parks is one of their core growth engines. And they really have put parks on a very, very solid financial footing. So parks brings in about 70% of their profit. They're investing very, very aggressively in this part of their business. They're spending about $60 billion over the next 10 years. They're going to add capacity. They're going to increase, attendance. And it's going to bring in substantial amounts of profits and really kind of set the company up for strong earnings growth. Now, that is something that you really want to see with a company like this. I mean, just this year, we're going to see about 25% EPS growth. in the Walt Disney Company. And I think over the next couple of years, we're going to see again, sustained, 20, like double-digit EPS growth. That's unheard of, like in the media world. So obviously, Bob Iger has taken a lot of right steps, and I think we're going to see that continued momentum in the stock price as well.
Yeah, I mean, since he's returned, we've seen the elimination of 8,000 jobs. He's cut over $7 billion in costs. Obviously, when you reduce costs, that helps shore up the bottom line, as you're speaking to, Geetha. But some of the ideas that Nelson Peltz and Trian Asset Management were bringing to Disney, things that they wanted to see corrected, even if they're not going to get the board seats that they wanted, they still do own a sizable stake in this company. And I wonder how you think about the influence they may still have on decisions moving forward, and if this is going to catalyze even further change at Disney, regardless of whether or not this proxy vote ultimately panned out for Peltz.
I agree with you, Kailey. I think it actually is, in a way, it is a good thing. Yes, it was a distraction, but it has definitely expedited the process of transformation and change at Disney. I mean, we can see that in the stock price. And I think what we're really going to see with the board this time around is obviously succession has kind of been a failure. And I think in many ways, the board has been responsible for this, especially with, the whole Bob Chapek kind of fiasco. And I certainly think that the board this time has to kind of take a much more rigorous, a much more disciplined, a much more thorough approach when it comes to, vetting possible candidates and choosing an appropriate successor for Bob Iger. So that's an area where I think we're definitely going to see some real tangible momentum.
We spoke earlier, Geetha, about some of the allies that Bob Iger gathered throughout this proxy battle, institutional investors, some bold names like George Lucas, folks from the entertainment industry who backed his effort, but also the Disney family. I wonder to what extent you can tell us how the family impacted this outcome.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really, when you kind of look at the composition of Disney shareholders, right, this is one of the few companies in the world that has such a huge base of retail individual investors, right? Almost 40% owned by, mom and pop kind of shareholders. And everybody kind of identifies with the brand. I mean, this is an iconic company. Even Nelson Peltz, who kind of spoke today on the shareholder meeting, said, I mean, this is a company that is so beloved, known for its brands, iconic, is such a good company when it comes to creativity and storytelling. And so I think that definitely played a huge part when it came, to the votes today. I mean, we know that Bob Iger encouraged all of his people to kind of call all the voters to, to really kind of make this decision. And I agree with you that definitely played into today's decision as well.
Geetha, finally, as you talk about the iconic brand that is Disney, as you were talking a moment ago about the kind of profit expansion we are seeing at Disney that is unusual for other media companies, how should we be thinking about Disney in relation to its peer group, knowing that in many ways it is different than, say, a Netflix or another streaming company, in that it has much more beyond Disney Plus, but what comparison should we be making here, and how strong would you characterize its position in the face of competitors like that in its many different businesses?
I think it is definitely one of the most strongly positioned companies in the old media landscape. And I mean, dealing with these kind of TV headwinds, cord cutting, people kind of are making this mass shift to streaming. It's not unique to Disney. It's happening across the whole media world, whether it's Warner Brothers, Discovery, Paramount. Disney has a little bit of an advantage because they have that sizable exposure, not just to TV. I mean, TV brings in only about 20-25% of their profits. They have that sizable exposure to parks, which really helps them. And then, of course, they've managed, I think, that transition to streaming a little bit better. So they obviously have more scale, they have better brands, they have better content. So that kind of helps set them apart a little bit. And as it comes to, catching up with Netflix, I think it's only a matter of time. Obviously, they were a little bit of a late entrant. They only came on the scene in 2019. Having said that, though, I think they've really built up a lot of scale and they've done it pretty quickly. And what we're going to see now is not so much building subscriber scale. It's really going to be more in terms of building profitability. But I think eventually we are going to get to those double-digit margins, which Disney has promised. And so that will kind of put them, I don't know if it'll put them on an equal footing with Netflix, but they're definitely catching up to Netflix pretty quickly.
Geetha, thank you so much for your analysis in the clutch here at Bloomberg Intelligence. We can always count on our colleagues at BI, Kailey.